welcome back to the Born channel. It's Grace Smith, the style director of Born here in Manchester. And today we have a very special guest, trans theatre maker and activist, Kate O'Donnell. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you for coming in. So Kate, tell the viewers at home maybe a little bit about yourself, people who maybe haven't heard of you before and what you do in your work.
Yeah. So, like you said, I'm a theatre maker. So the main thing I've been doing, that's kind of things have spiralled on the back of, was I made a theatre show called Big Girls Blouse about my experience of growing up as a trans child, really in the 1970s, when no one knew what being transgender was, least of all my family, who were still getting their head around what Findus crispy pancakes were. So on the back of that, I also made a little cabaret show called A Short History of My Tits, which deals with the surgical side of transitioning, and the momentum for that was the fact that a few years ago there was a lot of transphobia going on, especially in Russia, and I became really aware that I had a lot of privilege and I had a lot of stuff to say, and as a creative person, I thought I could use that creativity to raise trans visibility, and so I did that show a couple of years ago. It's kind of been touring the last year, and it's really coincided with this tidal wave of trans visibility.
Absolutely.
So it's been quite nice to be part of that and have a product almost in place.
Absolutely.
to kind of add another voice.
Yeah, and I always find that, like with you, what you present on stage, I always say with what I do is it's about kind of making people fall in love with you and then hitting them with the message. Yeah. And I think with what you do as well, it's very much that. Yeah. People are entertained, people are welcomed to laugh. And I think sometimes with trans issues and discussing trans issues, people who are outside that sphere feel scared to address those things.
We need to let them in.
Yeah,
we need to let them in. And actually, my work's been called gently political, and I really like that.
Because it is. It's like,
it's got the politics, but
laugh, laugh, laugh.
Yeah. Hit you with it.
Yeah. Laugh, laugh, laugh.
Yeah. Sing, dance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think they're very. I think costume, makeup, and all those things are very kind of a brilliant way to kind of pull people in. Humour, music. You get people in, and then you get them to. You've got to make people feel comfortable because, having transitioned, 12 years ago, I'm quite comfortable with it now.
Yeah.
But I can remember the early days where I wasn't comfortable with it, and I found it hard to hear other people's stories. But I love this creative energy that's around the trans. I'm really glad that's arrived. Yeah. Because before it was all quite earnest and a little bit people talked quite seriously about it, and it was always ended badly. Any trans story in the media, in a film, they're always going to die. Yeah. They were going to lose their love. They're going to be rejected by their family. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, you might be. But the thing about transitioning is, for me, it was moving towards who I really was. And that is so exciting. You kind of overcome all those other things. And I purposely created an uplifting show, which literally ends with a song. Yeah, absolutely. On purpose, to counteract how the media... I think when cisgendered people get on board, sometimes they want to have the miserable drama. Yeah. And that's not my experience of trans people around me. And as well, the kind of cisgender people and like the media around it, they're often really fixated on, the physical side of it and, the sensationalized side of it. Yeah. And I think what you have always done, especially with the short history of my tits as well, is it's kind of about that physical transition, but then you make it not really about that. Yeah. And I think that's really, really clever. And like I say, it's making people fall in love with you and then hitting them with the message. Yeah. And I think as well, I think your story as well, to be so open about it and about your queerness, and also the fact that you've come out so many times in your life, is definitely something that resonated with me, because I think when we met, that was something that we really connected on, because we had that very similar kind of... Well, you shaped my show. You shaped the second half of my show, because the first half was pretty much history, about my childhood, and I had quite an interesting childhood that, interesting for me, but I went to an all-boys school, and I kind of made the most of it. So I got to play all the girl parts in all the school plays, so I kind of, and I was very lucky that I had two elder brothers at that school who were fiercely protective at school, horrible to me at home, but I kind of made the most of all that. And so the first part of the show deals with that, and then when I was thinking about the second half of the show, a lot of people, when I did Q&As, were interested in what happened before I transitioned. And I remember meeting you for the first time, and you had antlers on, and we were in this brilliant event in Manchester, Dig the City, and it was an outdoor thing. I'd seen you around, and I'd been dying to come and chat to you, and this just seemed like the right moment. And you were really like, I am a gay man, I am a drag queen, and I am a trans woman. And I was like, so am I. Yeah. And that's really shaped. It really made me feel like I'm on the right track with the second half of the show, where I reveal about coming out as a gay man, drag queen, and transgender. Because I feel I don't meet many. You're a queer trans woman.
I am, yeah.
I think there are straight trans women.
Yeah.
And there's queer trans women.
Absolutely.
And we've had a very queer journey. I don't think there's been anything straight about our journey. And I don't meet many people like you. So
I think that's definitely a symptom of how, you know, the trans community has developed, because there's always been this feeling of blending and hiding, which I never ever felt. I never felt that. I never felt like I should hide myself away. I felt like I should always make a big song and dance of myself and show myself off. Yeah. And, you know, you touch on it in your show as well, like even from the youngest age, you know, you were always drawn to the limelight, and that was where you felt safest, and I felt that way too. And I think that's why we were drawn to theatre, and then also nightlife and stuff like that, because you were quite famous in the 90s, weren't you?
I was a drag queen in the 90s. There was Angel and Coco. I was Angel, which is a very ironic name for anybody in the room at that time. I was far from being an angel. But and in a way, there was a little bit of pioneering around them, because the drag scene was very traditional in Manchester when we came. It was very much feather boas and lip syncing in sequins dresses, you know, and we came along and we got some stick from the trans community, and not the drag community, because it's like at the moment with Cha Cha, I'm so excited about that whole, you know, House of Gorgeous, and it's really. That's the most energised I've been about drag, and again that's coincided with this massive interest in drag, and I think it can be very progressive, really creative, and really modern, and that's what we were doing. And when we hit that scene, me and Coco, it wasn't like that. No, but we kind of had our moment.
And as a result of it, you're kind of, you know, Manchester legends, really, aren't you? Queer legends.
Yeah, and that's why I've stayed in Manchester for 25 years. Yeah. And I could have moved away, because when I transitioned, I thought, well, maybe because it's tough up north. You know, Manchester has a toughness to it.
It does.
and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll go to Brighton and transition in Brighton. And I nearly did. And I thought, do you know what, Manchester, I'm going to do it here. You owe me. And I recently won the Be Proud award in Manchester as part of Manchester City Council, and I was extremely proud of getting that. It was about how it was a special achievement award for people who've made their communities safer and happier. And I was like, do you know, I'm really glad I stuck with Manchester, because I feel like Manchester's grown around me, and it did support me in the way I needed. And I feel like I really love Manchester at the minute. I feel like it's really giving me what I need, and you know, and things like this. We're born now. It's happening in Manchester.
Absolutely.
You know.
And I think, you know, for us as trans people, for things to change, we just have to be really visible. Yeah. And I think that's something that you've really kind of, with Big Girls Blouse and with, you know, all this kind of, in the last year, certainly, it's kind of all blossomed and bloomed. And I think you are a really kind of, I think you're a really important part of that, and I think you're a great spokesperson for trans people, because I think a lot of what trans people in the past have done is tried to hide it away, whereas you're very, very open about your journey, and I think that's what's going to make the difference for people to see, you know, this beautiful, well-adjusted, glamorous lady, you know, who has been on this journey and has lived these lives. You know, for some people, trans people, they shy away from the fact that they might have identified as gay, whereas I'm really proud because I got to do that. I got to be a gay man and I got to be a drag queen, and there's not many women in the world that can say that they did that.
We're very lucky ladies.
We're lucky ladies.
We're lucky ladies. And who knows what next?
Who knows what next?
You know, I find this whole non-binary thing really interesting. Because when I transitioned, it was very binary. Did you look like a woman? Yeah, all right, we'll let you have some hormones. And I like the fact I've cut my hair short, and a lot of people think I'm a power dyke, and I really love that because it makes me feel queer. Yeah. I'd rather look queer than straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really am happy with that.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I'm freeing up my look as this non-binary, gender binary thing comes in. I like it. I like this opening up. I feel that's the next exciting thing for me.
Absolutely.
And I like the idea. That feels like another playground. And I want to explore, well, where do I fit in to the binary, non-binary?
I think for me, like when I started my physical transition, because there was never a really a male mode. I was always quite androgynous, but when I first started my transition, I did really think about it in that very binary sense, and I wanted to get from this end all the way up to that end, and I kind of powered my way up there, got to the other end, and then kind of bounced back down a little bit, and because of that strength that I found, and that self-love, and that, you know, that understanding of myself that I found through my transition, it gave me the ability to go, well, yeah, I am masculine, and yeah, I am feminine, and this is who I am.
I love the fact you're a drag queen. I love the fact, I think you're the first trans person I met who was a drag queen. And that really messed with my head for a little bit. And I thought, how can she be transgender and a drag queen? Because I think I had a very outdated version of what drag queens were, and drag is something very different. It's a whole way of being, a creative force.
Again, I think it's people thinking about it in the binary sense of it.
Very much.
You know, man dressing up as woman.
Yeah.
But drag, the word drag for me, it means theatre, it means costume, it means music, it means entertainment, it means all of those things. And I have friends who are trans who do drag, I have friends who are men, gay men, lesbians, you know, cisgender women that do drag. And I think it's all about that, like you say, that kind of blowing apart of the binaries of gender. Forget about male and female, just be who you are. So Kate, how do you feel about Caitlyn Jenner's coming out this year?
It's not the coming out, it's not the transition I'd have wanted.
No.
I think there's a real need to, even though we're talking about visibility, I think when you decide to transition and you take hormones, and there's so much going on, and you can see that with her, she looks dazed and confused, you know, in the programs. I think you need a moment to back off and go and experience those changes and process. I remember before I kind of went back to work, I took like a couple of weeks off, and actually the funny thing was I convinced them that I needed special leave, so I didn't use any of my annual leave. I went, what happens is you usually given special leave, and they were like, because they didn't know 12 years ago, they were like, right, we'll have 2 weeks. And I just went to Brighton for 2 weeks, and I really needed that time to live in that. I felt like she had a tough transition, but with lots of privilege at the same time, you know, very cushioned. They're just a machine, aren't they? But I think what's been really interesting is how many people have been behind her. And it was like when Nadia won the Big Brother. That was the year I'd transitioned, or I'd only been just before I had my surgery. It was around that time. And to know that the public had voted her to win was very powerful. You know, to know that that you know, this world can absorb a trans person and carry them along and not.
But I think that a lot of that was to do with the fact that she'd been in the house and they got to know her.
Yeah, definitely.
And got to see that she was like really funny and a really great person. And
what's happened to her?
What's happened to her? She released a couple of pop songs, didn't she? And then
oh dear. But she was a very big part of my. You need those celebrities.
Do you know who mine was?
Who was yours?
Dana International.
Of course.
Yeah, when she won the Eurovision Song Contest, that was the first time
both
I ever...
very visible out trans women.
The first time that I realised that a transgender person, that she was even transgender, because when she won the Eurovision Song Contest, I didn't know she was transgender. But then I saw her years later on Eurotrash, and she was talking about being transgender, and you know,
we need those. It's like Tula, the model in the Bond film. I can remember seeing her being interviewed. She was for Your Eyes Only. She's the legs on the poster, and they're quite shocking, those moments. I remember somebody was saying, like, in our culture, we don't get to see many role models. We don't have trans role models in our families, in our friends, in our schools. So we very much look to magazines, to film, to interviews, to Eurovision Song Contest or Big. We need those as trans people. And I don't know about you, I feel like I had an antennae ready. I had
To
my
find
trans
her.
queer. Yeah, you know, I was always looking out for those.
Yeah.
Like Quentin Crisp,
Yeah.
you know, seeing his film when I was young.
Yeah.
For some reason, I got left to watch that film, The Naked Civil Servant, on my own. Nobody else seemed to be in the living room. So I watched nearly all of that when I was quite young. And I remember being like mesmerised by this really effeminate queer person who pushed through and faced all that homophobia.
It was Bowie for me.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
Because my mum, like, his music was always in the house.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw, like, Ziggy Stardust, it was the first time I realised that you could play with your gender and play with your appearance. And, you know, that was really like a pivotal moment for me.
Yeah.
And then obviously discovering all the music of the 80s and Boy George.
Boy George,
and
I was the new
Marilyn
romantic as well, so that was very liberating as well.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
I felt really lucky that we had that. You could play with your gender and sexuality and just call it new romantic.
Yeah.
It was all under that umbrella.
Yeah.
And then I became a punk, and then I got into ska. I was very fickle.
Yeah.
When it came to music.
Bye. On to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, you know, with Caitlin and there being a real spotlight on trans issues, how have you felt in the last sort of like 12 months? Has it made a difference to you and your career and what you've been doing?
I think so. I think this interest, the show has been specifically booked, and there's been a lot of heat on that show because people are looking around for work to fill that gap. You know, it's not necessarily a commercial gap, but this kind of social interest and this heightened awareness of this topic. And I think genuinely people are looking for representatives and people who can talk and create and produce stuff that will help. Like I'm starting to do a lot of work with schools now, so it's kind of going full circle. My stuff's around schools, my experience in schools, and now I wrote a trans policy the other week for a school, and I'm doing a project in Ipswich where I'm going to be doing the show to 100 school kids and then do a workshop.
And isn't it amazing to think that, you know, there might be a day where, you know, kids like us won't get bullied and it won't be an issue for a child to be, you know, gender non-conforming, and, you know, they'll not be policed in that way that we were when we were younger.
And what's really amazing about that, because I do some work with Mermaids, the children's charity. I met my first trans kids last year when I hosted Trans Pride. Yeah. And these little kids came up to me, the two little girls, and they came up to my stall, and we had balloons, and they were like, "Can we have your balloons?" And I was like, "Well, if you can get them off the stall, you can have them." And they're like, "Right," and they started to undo them. And I said, "What are you doing here then today?" They went, "We're transgender." And I went, "Are you?" I was like, "So am I." And I've kept in touch with them.
Wonderful.
And I've got them to do some Q&As after my show. So to have a 10-year-old child, little trans girl, talking to an audience, it's really powerful.
Really powerful.
But she'd had very similar experiences to my childhood. But the difference is now she's brought in neutral toilets, gender non-specific toilets. It was all done by the teachers, and she's just getting on being a girl. Yeah. You can tell.
That's
in fact, she's almost moved over it. You know, we went to this event in Brighton, this trans event, and she sat there and she went, "Who's transgender here?" I went, "Go have a look around. What do you think?" She went, "I can't tell." You know, she kind of just normalised it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
her family had as well. And for me to have met a trans child feels really exciting, and I feel really hopeful, and I love supporting that charity.
Because if you think about it, think about all those feelings that we had going through being a child, being a teenager, you know, being a young adult, coming out as a gay man, you know, all of the stuff that we went through. That child's not going to have to face that at all.
They're on it.
They're on it.
They're on it, and they've got a sense of who they are, and it's not hidden, it's not confused. They're not dressing up like a girl in school plays as a little fix, you know, or trying to sneak a bit of gender stuff in wherever they can, dolls or, you know, toys and trying your mum's wig on or your makeup, you know, whatever. Yeah, it's very different for them. It's more authentic. I feel like I had to make it up. I had to find little scraps of girliness. Yeah. You know, like I talk about in the show where I got my parents to change my comic from the Beano to Twinkle, which was a girls' comic in the 70s, and that was such a breakthrough. Yeah. And I think you took your little victories where you could.
Absolutely.
Whereas she's not. You know, the trans kids that I know, they're just in it. They're just in
Living
it, fighting with their brothers, giving lip to their mum. You know, just getting on and being little girls. You know, wanting to wear a red dress. You know, because they're on stage and look pretty, and
beautiful.
I love that. Yeah.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, it really is.
I think I'm lucky because I never had my mum never policed my gender like that, and that's why I'm so lucky. But all of the stuff that I had to face came from like the outside world. I remember my first day at school and being like, oh my God, you know, where do I sit? Do you know what I mean? Like who, like I'm not
kind of
like
missed
these.
that, didn't you? Even though my story was 40 years ago, yours was 15 years ago, maybe that 10-year-old kind of experience. But you still missed this new wave. You experienced a lot of what I experienced at schools, that prejudice and that misunderstanding of gender and confusion. Whereas now, hopefully kids won't have that.
Yeah, you know? 100%. I think, you know, in the school that I went to, I was like brutally bullied through that, and, you know, used to get beaten up a lot, and because people just couldn't get their head around it.
Gender.
Yeah, because people just couldn't get their head around it. But now my mum became the headmistress of the high school that I went to, and now there's out gay children. There's a trans child, doesn't know that 100%, but just knows that she feels more comfortable being a bit more female, but they are just getting on with their education in that same school that it was like so hard for me to be in. And so stuff is changing, isn't it? Definitely.
I hope so. I think it's exciting times. I think it's exciting for adults, and I like this kind of thing. It's happening both ends. You've got the older trans people coming out, and then you've got these young kids. It's broader.
I think the big thing is to get, you know, cisgendered people to think about their gender.
Yeah,
that's
we're all on a spectrum.
Yeah, we're all on a spectrum, and I think the thing that blocks things moving along for trans people quite a lot of the time is that people who are outside of that sphere or have never been in a position to question that can't get their head around it. And so I think for us, telling our stories and expressing ourselves and being really open with it all, like you do in your shows, that's what is going to cause people to think, oh, well, when I was little, I felt this way, and you know, and I had this experience, and maybe I'm not, you know.
It does touch people.
It does touch
because
people.
I've seen that, like some of the audiences. We did a show in Doncaster, and I had a really young trans male who was 15, and then I had somebody who was in their 60s who transitioned 40 years ago. From female to male. So that was really unusual. Yeah. And both of them were very moved by the show and the story, and were both very vocal and felt really, really happy that some of them have been represented. And I was like, I'm really happy that I'm also representing trans men, because that's another level of visibility or invisibility that's happening. And I don't know about you, but I really feel like, you know, recently I've been nominated for an LGBT Role Models Hero Award.
Which is amazing.
I know, I'm really happy about that, but I realise it's not about me. I'm really like, it's for the cause. I have kind of separated off, because if I want to get attention, I can get on stage and have a great time. But I'm really thinking bigger. I'm using me as a brand or as a name or as a... If it gets attention for the cause. And I think that is sometimes hard. I think people think Kate's an absolute egomaniac. It's like, yeah, I have quite a healthy ego, and I am a show-off, and that's why I've always show off. That's fine. This is bigger. This is bigger, and it's political. It's gently political, and it's like out the 3 role models, only one, me, is trans. So I'm really keen to get that. It's the time to get the trans. Have a trans role model in that category, but it's a hard concept to get that. I don't know if you find that. Some people think you're publicising you. They don't quite get there's a bigger agenda here.
Absolutely.
We've actually got a fight on our hands. You know, and I think we probably do it with lip gloss, and you know, like people misinterpret. Like, you know, you helped design the costumes and got them together, and they got big, didn't they? You like, we need a big girl's blouse costume. And it's great to have a lovely costume, but it's also so people will go away remembering. You want to hit people.
It's about making a statement, isn't it? You know.
Yes.
And I think with style and fashion, and you know, obviously there's a big separation between what you would wear on stage and what you would wear in day-to-day life. So through kind of expressing your story and your journey on stage and having that kind of cathartic moment and expressing it to everyone and kind of showing your story to the world, do you feel that your kind of style choices have changed through that? You mentioned earlier about, you know, going for a shorter hairstyle and not being afraid of what that represents.
Yeah, I think as I've moved more into my queer, I feel much queerer now, so I think my look's queerer. With short grey hair, which isn't very common actually. A lot of trans people, and I did it. I grew my hair as long as I could. I looked very soft, and my makeup was more gentle, and I didn't really want to stand out. I wanted to pass. You know, it was very much 12 years ago. That was the thing, and that was the terminology that was used, which is wrong. Like as you say, I don't want to pass. I want to excel. You know, I love that. You know, and I think with the show and stepping into the queer me, I think I've got visually more queer, like some of the colours that are, and I think when you've got your hair grey, you need to up your colour and have a bit more fun with it and not frightened to not look so cisgen passing, to actually be myself and look how I look.
I mean, for me, like, you know, I've always loved playing with my style and playing with, you know, makeup, hair, styling, all of those things, because it gives me so much confidence, you know. And I think, you know, these days when people are staring at me on the street, I don't think they're looking at me because I'm trans. I think they're looking at me because I look like some fashion witch floating down the street. Do you know what I mean? And
I feel like that now.
And I think for me, you know, that I love the idea of making the most of yourself and giving, you know, I feel incredibly empowered by makeup and by styling myself, and you know, in your show you talk about the importance of a statement necklace, and
never far from
a statement necklace. But I think that it's that I'm going to do this for me. So that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for coming into the Born office today. It's been lovely chatting to you, and I hope you guys at home have got to know a little bit more about Kate and what she gets up to. So if you love this interview and you want to see more, make sure you subscribe, comment, like, follow, all of that stuff. You can keep in contact with us on the Born Twitter and Instagram, which is Born to Turn Heads. But until next time, goodbye.